Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be here today. It's even nicer to see so many people assembled to hear talk about security. We've definitely come a long way in the last few years. So obviously, I thank the organizers for inviting me to talk to you today. It's a huge subject. I can only scratch the surface, of course. And indeed, as I was sitting there this morning thinking about my presentation, it occurred to me just how much I'm not going to talk to you about. So I'd actually like, bizarrely enough, to start with that, just to give you a few ideas about some of the stuff that you should be thinking about, and hopefully you are, to complement what I'm going to tell you, and which we've selected to talk about in a bit more depth. And what I noted down was training and skill sets. I'm not going to say anything about this. Hugely important. How do you align cybersecurity training with business needs? It's not just the CISO, right? It's not just the network security engineer, it's everybody. A lot of work needs to be done there. Cybersecurity is an economic enabler. I think we worked out, don't quote me, but it's somewhere around 90 billion opportunity costs that we will miss if we do not get this right in the next 2 to 3 years. In any case, it's a huge number. And this is the difference between using cybersecurity to stimulate the economy or going the wrong way and have it as a barrier for the economy. I'm only going to touch on this, but I will say a couple of things about it. Agile support processes. We need to become faster, of course, more efficient, but more effective. That's the key word. Standardization, certification, etc. We have great processes in place, but the fact of the matter is they cannot keep pace with the rate at which technology is changing. And we know that, and we have to adapt our systems to deal with it. Not going to say a lot about it. I would like you to think about it as I go along. Building cybersecurity into the industrial process, Industry 4.0, amazingly important. For instance, the average car of tomorrow apparently contains more than 100 million lines of code spread across all different components in the car coming from all kinds of people. Supply chain issues, where is this code coming from? Probably it's being downloaded to a large extent from code repositories on the internet. Who's checking that code? You tell me. So we have some big issues there. Aligning cybersecurity and safety. You would say that's obvious. They're the same thing. They're not. Think about the German wings crash. I'm sure most of you know it. Very interesting. The pilot used a security feature to kill people. That's an example where security and safety were definitely not aligned. And I think as we move into an age of cyber-physical systems, IoT, etc., this will become a much more complex question and something that we're going to have to give a lot of attention to. And then, last but not least, it's a huge subject. I don't think I'm going to touch upon it all today, but we have a very ambitious new data protection and privacy legislation. This has to be put in place smoothly and at optimal cost for industry. We cannot move into a society which is bringing people into the courts every time we have the smallest incident on data protection. And yet, at the moment, we have a fantastic legislative framework, but we're really light years away in terms of our tools and practices to implement that framework. So there's some things to think about as I take you through this presentation. When I work out how this clicker works. There we go. What I want to talk about, I'll very briefly talk about ENISA. I'll give you a flavor of what the legislation is like at the moment, and the policy statement is a bit dry, so I'll skip over it quickly. I'll talk about two very important things. The NIS directive and the digital single market. They're complementary views on security in Europe at the moment, and I'll explain why. Then I'll go into some more practical stuff. I'll talk to you a bit about the ENISA threat landscape, which is now quite a mature deliverable on our part, and is, I believe, showing you some quite interesting stuff. We'll talk about standardization, certification, and some future challenges. Okay, this is how we like to think about ENISA. Who knows ENISA, by the way? Who has heard of ENISA? Ooh, could be better. Okay. So let me explain who ENISA are. ENISA is the European Union Network and Information Security Agency. We are the cybersecurity agency for the EU. We are a regulatory agency, so we are autonomous, although of course we work hand in hand with the Commission, the Parliament, and indeed private sector to make sure that we are advancing cybersecurity in Europe in all its different facets. And the most important part of that equation is you, and I really mean you. You are at the center of this picture here, because everything ENISA does, it does through its stakeholder communities. We bring people together, we search for common solutions, we try and leverage the immense amount of experience that's out there in member states. I run all the operations in NISA, and to give you an idea, I only have 50 people. You know, that's not a lot if you're dealing with the whole of European cybersecurity. So this model is incredibly important to us, leveraging what's out there. And I thank you for that, I really do, because honestly, we get great contributions and the model works very well, as I hope I'll convince you soon. 3 types of deliverables. Advice, we produce a lot of papers. We've got about 50 rolling out of the door as we speak between now and the end of the year. This is advice, right? You can write the best paper in the world, but if no one reads it, it doesn't get you anywhere. Even if they read it, have they understood it? If they've understood it, do they implement it? If they implement it, do they get it right? You get the picture. Papers are a long way from impact, which is why we as an agency are moving much more into the, I would say, hands-on, get your hands dirty sort of work, where we can work together with you and learn as we go along and guide you to guide each other. So we do a lot of policy implementation support. An example will be the Telecoms Directive, where we now have obligatory security breach notification in Europe. When this first came out, everybody threw their hands up in the air and said, it's not going to work, the sky's going to fall down, we're all going to die, it's too expensive, everything possible. It does work, it's very economically efficient, and we have some great data. We learned a lot from this, and when I take this data to conferences like this, and I ask experts what they think the major risk is in the telecoms industry, the experts nearly always get it wrong. And let me give you a clue. It is absolutely not malicious code or cyber attacks. That's around 6%. Yeah? So we learn a lot from this stuff. If you want to know what it is, you have to go to our website and have a look. Finally, we run what's probably the world's biggest cybersecurity exercise. It took place 2 weeks ago in Athens. Very successful exercise, again, bringing together all member states, public and private sector, to play rather a sophisticated cyber attack game with lots of videos and injects and intriguing scenarios, etc. We really believe in this. This is learning by doing and making sure that the policy people are creating policy based on solid experience. So that's very quickly the way we work. But I think that's one of the most important slides today, because my aim, obviously, is to get you involved in the process and to deliver something to you. And if you're not getting anything out of NISA, and I see a lot of you aren't, because some of you didn't raise your hands, there's work to be done. Okay, some of the legislative stuff, as I say, it's a bit dry, so we'll go over it quickly. We have a lot of things going on, actually. The big one is the NIS directive. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. It's the first real piece of pure cybersecurity legislation in Europe. Will have a massive impact on all of the member states. But we have electronic ID regulation, we have the telecoms package, things in cloud, etc. So a lot of stuff going on. Let me just say, incidentally, NISA is not particularly geared towards legislation. We really favor soft practice, yeah? So our way of doing things is, first we try to get together with the communities to build solutions together. It's more agile, it's quick, and it gets better buy-in. If you develop the solutions yourself, they're your solutions. So legislation is a bit of a last call, but it's still necessary, because some things, to resolve them, you really have to legislate. So bear in mind, however, we come at all problems, our first point of attack is the other end of the scale. What can we do through softer, more agile methods? So NIS policy goals. NIS being Network and Information Security, it's the EU speak for good old information security or cyber security. 2 big blocks, really, without going into details. We want to increase cybersecurity capabilities across Europe, okay? I mean, in every sense of the word. That's right from training, down to how we secure specific systems, down to how we talk to each other, etc. Again, really a lot of work to be done. And we want to, of course, make the EU a strong player in cybersecurity. So we are experimenting with things like public-private partnerships, and there's a new one come up. I'm going to talk about it. Some challenges there, incidentally. But here the idea is to make sure that we not only secure our own systems well, but we make us a market force worldwide in cybersecurity. And we have an excellent background for that, incidentally. Europe has always been very strong in security. So what is this thing, the NIS directive? Well, on the slide there, you can see 2 big bubbles, operators of essential services and digital service providers. The directive really started out on the right-hand side. That is, how do we secure what are called these essential operators? And essential operators are people who do the things that keep our daily lives going. Things which, if they were not to work correctly, we would all suffer almost immediately. Transport, drinking water, energy, electricity grids, these kind of things, yeah? So it makes a lot of sense to have legislation here because the impact would be very fast and very, what's the word, extreme, I think, if someone were to attack these systems successfully. So most of the directive really started out there, but as the directive was being written, we realized that some of the so-called softer systems are not as soft as we may think they are. When the Fukushima incident took place, information sharing took place to a large part on the cloud. It wasn't designed to happen that way, it just did. So cloud is becoming very important. Search engines are important. If you can't find something, you can't do your job. So there's an element of also securing what are called these digital service providers. It's quite a heavy approach on the right-hand side, totally dominated and led by the member states. This is a member states prerogative. The left-hand side, more influence from the European institutions, from ourselves as well, and a lighter touch. We do not want to put too many obligations on industries that need to be agile and fast-moving to survive. But both need to be working in the event of a crisis. Right, in terms of the directive and what it asks for, it covers a number of things. It covers increased cybersecurity capacities at the national level. It covers increased EU-level cooperation, and this is really a big part of it, making sure that people talk to each other and do things across Europe. Now, let me just say, I hear so many times that we must cooperate more, we must share more information. This is a very easy thing to say up here on this stage, but as we do it all the while, I cannot tell you how difficult it is to do. Really, really difficult. True cooperation is enormously difficult. And I would say, of all the things we set out doing, I'll throw a figure in the air, but I would say probably 8 out of 10 fail. Because the first stages are easy. You talk to people, you get an idea, but then you have to commit resources. You have to push the thing through. You have to iron out your difficulties. So cooperation is not evident at all. And this is trying to put this right by investing a lot of time and money into it. The second myth I would like to kill here is this idea that we should all share more information. I really don't think this is true. Think about it. Do you really need more information? I don't think so. You probably need the right information for you to do a particular job. And I can guess that most of you are not struggling with the amount of information you have. You are struggling with the analysis behind it and how to make that information work for you. That is the challenge of today. And that is one of the things within the NICE directive we want to put right. Analyze the information and make sure people get quality information. So, we're just hearing about Watson. Here's an approach for making that happen, to make sure that the information you get enables you to do something. And then we need to have mechanisms for checking when that's happened and make sure we learn from the process, etc. So it all sounds rather banal and, we're just doing the same old stuff. But we really have very interesting goals. I think we've learned a lot over the past few years. So apart from the cooperation, the major part of the directive is in terms of securing these two types of operators, the essential operators and the digital service providers. Let me see if I can use there we go. So what's our role in this? Well, as in everything, NIST's role is really a supporting role. We assist, yeah? We don't take a leading role. There are enough leaders in Europe, yeah? We don't want to lead. We want to be good at helping you, whoever you are in the particular problem at hand. In this particular case, we're assisting the member states in developing national strategies. National strategies are not new. They weren't born with the NICE directive. We've been doing it for a long time with the member states. And there are a lot out there, over 20. I can't remember exactly how many. And because we've been working very closely with the member states, they're very aligned, which is a great thing. They're all looking at similar things, which means that, when Poland talks to Greece or Greece talks to Portugal or whatever, they're talking more or less about the same things. And that's the beginning of good communication. Already we're on the same page. So strategies is in there. We're assisting the Commission and the Member States in developing what are called minimum security requirements. Now, a note here. This is a multi-sector approach, and sectors do not have the same ideas about security. And that tends to be hidden in conversations. It's one of these complexities that if you don't bring it out straight away, gets forgotten about. Let me give you an example. Most of my career, I was a Chief Information Security Officer in the banking community. In the banks, you really care about integrity, because if the integrity of your data is affected, you lose money. If you're a private banker, you care about confidentiality. In the energy business, you care about availability. If your electricity grid goes down, you're in real problems. In the bank, you can write that off with a contractual clause, yeah? So you may think that when we talk about confidentiality, integrity, availability, we're all on the same page. Actually, we're not. We have very different ideas about what these things mean. And again, we hope to bring some of this out when setting these requirements. And what we will probably find is there will be a core set of requirements applicable to everybody, and then there will be specialized variants for particular sectors. We assist the EU Commission and the Member States in developing incident reporting frameworks. I have been in the industry for about 25 years. What I personally remark is there has been a change over the last 5 years, which is putting a lot more emphasis on the, how can I put it, the reaction side to incidents. Up until about 5 years ago, most of the effort was in the preparatory work. Now there's much more emphasis on the response side. That's not a bad thing, as long as it doesn't, the lever doesn't shift completely and we forget the preparatory side. Both are necessary, both have to work together very smoothly. So incident response is a big thing at the moment in Europe. We're trying to make it better, we're trying to make it faster, we're trying to make it more effective. And this is a core component of the directive as well. And last but not least, we will be looking at better defining who is in this category of essential operators. So who are we talking about? We have a very good idea, but it's not precise enough for the moment. We will also be, I should perhaps explain that in terms of cooperation, there are two mechanisms within the directive. There's what's called the cooperation group, which is a very high-level political group which discusses policy and strategy and all these nice ideas on a long-term basis. And then you have the CSERTs network, or CERTs, if you know it by this acronym, who are doing the operational stuff and learning on a day-to-day basis what is happening, how is the environment changing. If these two groups do not talk to each other regularly and efficiently, we will miss a huge opportunity. Because the way it should work, of course, is the CSERT should say, hey guys, this is not happening anymore, you need to look at this. This is where the action is. And the policy people should say, right, okay, but we think this is important because this is protecting society. And so we should have a dialogue. And that's not going to be easy. It's one of those things, again, that's very easily written on paper, but getting it to work, I think, is going to be tough. But that's the way it's supposed to work, at least. ENISA will be secretariat for the CSERT network, and we will definitely aim to push it in this direction. And we will definitely aim to keep it down to earth, concrete, and pragmatic, which are the key words for everything we do, I hope. Okay, so that is, if you like, the critical protection side of what we're doing in Europe. But I chose another example for you, which is a thing called the digital single market. This is an entirely different sort of concept. This is looking at the economic aspects of security. And as I say, there are huge opportunities here, really. We cannot afford to miss this boat. It's amazing. You take any walk of life involving computers, and I can bet you that security comes up within the first 5 minutes when you discuss it. It really does, yeah. So this is, to my mind, even more important in terms of Europe's future than the critical infrastructure side. I say that because I consider the critical infrastructure side to be really on the good path, and we're making a lot of good developments here. Here we have a lot of work to do. So some slides. The data is a little bit old, excuse me for that, but if I'd have refreshed them, the message won't change an awful lot. So in terms of size of EU cybersecurity market, well, we are quite a way behind North America, but we're doing pretty well with respect to the rest of the big blocks within the world, yeah? Nevertheless, an important gap there. In terms of compound annual growth rate, the average is around 8%, and Europe is running at 7%. Might not seem a lot to you, but it's a lot of money, and it makes a lot of difference. So again, some catching up to do, I think. And in terms of IT spending, again, we lag behind the States. So I think the States is really setting the trend here, and I think we will see everyone moving in this direction because everything we do is being dominated by information systems. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. Yeah? If we don't invest more, we will not, in my opinion at least, be able to reap the benefits of these new technologies. Now, speaking of which, new technologies is a funny thing because people talk about them as if they're tomorrow. Internet of Things, for instance. Every time I hear about it, people say, it's coming tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, it's there now. It's in people's houses, yeah? It's going in, it's being used. So, you know, we need to have solutions now, not tomorrow. And I think it's very important to realize this. I think in Europe we do this a lot. You know, we're still on the learning curve, as it were, but we need to be faster. And Internet of Things, I think, is a great example. I read a really funny thing in Paris, by the way. I have to tell you this story. It was a poster on the metro, and it was this lady pointing to a device saying, "I secure my house for 20 euros a month." I wouldn't like to live there, honestly. I have my people hacking these things. Think about it. If you've got a device that costs 50 euros, how the hell do you protect the cryptographic keys? I come from cryptography. That's what I spent most of my life doing in the banking sector. It's expensive. It's difficult. It requires very highly tuned skill sets. So I'm not knocking the Internet of Things. Please don't get me wrong. But, you know, it's a different opportunity-risk balance than a banking system or a hospital or things like this. And I think the consumer really has to know this. I'm not saying don't buy it. Buy it with your eyes open and make sure you know how it's secured. Okay, I'll just make you aware of a report that we've just produced. It's a sort of, it's a complement to this story, and it's about the cost of incidents. We studied a lot of independent reports which have been produced, and I think one of the biggest conclusions we came to is that these reports are not comparable, unfortunately. Everyone tends to use different parameters, different assumptions, so it's a shame. It's a shame because we can learn little pockets of information from here and there, and we give you some sort of pearls of wisdom that's distilled from this report in this slide. But one of the things we would advise and are trying to encourage communities to do is to agree on a standard set of parameters so that we can compare this data and see what is really happening and where the real cost of incidents is. Incidentally, all our deliverables as a public entity are, of course, free. They're published on our website. Please go and have a look. You get some very high-level abstract material there, but you get stuff that goes down to the command level as well. So there's something there for everybody. Please go and have a look. You can't lose as it's free. And the feedback we get when people do use it is generally quite encouraging. Okay, so, well, you can read this for yourself. I mean, finance, ICT, and energy sectors have the highest incident costs. Most common cyber attacks for financial sector appear in DDoS, etc. I'll let you digest it. I'll also tell you the answer now to my riddle a bit earlier. When we analyze the Article 13 data for security breach notification, and it's been consistent now over 5 years, the biggest source of risk in European telecommunications industry is actually badly configured systems and badly written software. Huge. And when you think about it, I was a security practitioner for many years. Many of you may have been too. I really, you know, I set up routers and Unix boxes, etc. It's easy to make mistakes. It really is. Huh? And that's the problem. The devil is in the detail, and it's such a difficult thing to do. Configuration and handling it turns out to be a major thing. Cybersecurity attacks, and I am not saying don't ignore them. Please don't misinterpret my message. But they're still, I believe, only around the 6 to 10%. In terms of, you know, what they cause in terms of impact. So they're important, and we need to follow up on them, but there's other more important stuff which we need to get right first. And that's the power of breach notification data. No matter what people said about we wouldn't learn anything from it, we did. And we are applying those results, and communities are working with it. Okay, Digital Single Market is an EU initiative, okay? It's not a piece of legislation, it's a strategy, and it's aimed at common EU data protection rules, the single telecom market, copyright digital content, and it has an interesting security component, which is called the contractual PPP. Now, let me say a few words about PPPs. The idea of this thing is that the EU will put in money and industry has to replicate it. So I think for every million that the European Commission puts into the pot, industry has to put in 3 million from recognition. But of course, it's a funding mechanism. It's encouraging people to work on cybersecurity problems. So it's a great thing. And we really support this. It's a fantastic development. But I would also like to say, make you think about some of the challenges of public-private partnerships. We know from having studied this for many years in INISA that the key to a good public-private partnership is trust. Won't surprise you. And that pretty much means face-to-face communication and getting to know people. You are not going to share security-related information unless you have a strong relationship with someone. Well, if you think about it, the smallest public-private partnership you can have on the European level is 56 people. You've got 28 public and 28 private. And that's a lot of people. So, you know, I sort of think that we need to look at these models and see how they're going to evolve. There are lots and lots of companies in this, and it's a great thing, and I think it'll work. But I think as we move towards the future, I predict that we may make more use of the national PPPs and maybe try and put some organization into them at the European level to complement this mechanism. But do be aware of it, if only because there are some opportunities there to contribute and to do things. So where we will be joining forces with the PPP is in the area of certification, trusted computing, virtualization, and information sharing. But the group is doing a lot of work, and we will only be able to touch the surface here because they have many, many more resources than we do, so we will choose where we intervene. Okay, I'm going to skip this. You can read it later. I'm going to leave you with my slides because I want to cover some more important stuff. In this threat landscape, please, if you do anything, go and have a look at this. It's really a very interesting document, and the funny thing about this document is, NIST does absolutely no threat analysis. It's really typical of the way we work. What we do is we go right the way through the globe, and we get everybody else's threat analyses. So we're a sort of Manuel Watson in this sense. Yeah? We bring it all together, and we try to kick out the stuff that people don't agree with. We try to emphasize the stuff that people do agree with, and then, and this is the important thing, we map it to particular business segments. So we give you this analysis to make the data more applicable to what you're doing. And that's the value of the report, I think. Yeah? Huge number of inputs. I think this year we have over 500 open source inputs, so lots and lots of information going in there. What came out of the last one? Well, these are the kind of things that we were saying last year, and then I'll give you a preview of this year. Orchestrated actions, this is the good stuff, sorry. The good stuff is that people like Europol, and we are on the EC3, the Europol Euro Cyber Crime Center board, so we get to work with them on this. Orchestrated actions to take down malicious infrastructure. It's going very well, yeah? The police are really getting together and are managing to bring down these things. That's a good thing. Strengthening of governmental awareness. Even this conference today, you know, shows that in general awareness is going up massively. This is a very good development. Developments in threat intelligence in general, proliferation of information sharing, it's all getting better. And we even see that it's starting to filter into R&D, so that we're starting to see input into things like Horizon 2020 and other big research programs specifically related to cybersecurity. All good things. Some not so good stuff. We note persistent attacks under the radar. So if you're at home running antivirus, firewalls, etc., as I hope you all are, you've still got a router in your house. The chances that the attacker, if they want to get you, which of course we're not usually big targets, might go for the hardware in the router or things like this. Yeah? So a lot of stuff going under the radar. Enhancements in the provision of cybercrime as a service. I don't think I need to tell you this. These guys are really good. The code they are producing is industry standard code, using industry standard tools. Yeah? It's a real business. So, you know, the kind of stuff they're coming out with is extremely sophisticated and highly maintainable. This is development over the last 5 years. You know, 10, 15 years ago, people were attacking sites, bragging about it, and then going home. Now it's big money. So we see a lot of good processes in place. Highly efficient malware weaponization infection tools based on detected vulnerabilities. And of course, it's very easy to attack something, it's much harder to defend it. So we still have the archetypal problem of things like applying security patches on time. And again, to go to the, to the energy sector, where many of these people are running very old-fashioned systems. I even heard a rumor that the Deepwater platform was running NT4, but there would be a good reason for that, because it's highly stable. The problem is, after a certain time, the suppliers do not give security patches anymore. So it's a trade-off that is not easy to get right, actually. And highly profitable operation of malicious infrastructures and malware campaigns. This is what the deliverable looks like. It gives you the top threats, and it tells you how they've changed. I think it's fairly obvious. But it also gives you related diagrams per sector, so CIIP, mobile, cloud, etc. It shows you how these things are evolving in the different business sectors, and I think that's quite useful information. Just a peek into 2016. Got this slide made especially for this conference because we're not ready to publish it yet. It's in preparation. What we will probably say, there's a caveat emptor on this, it's year of the cybercrime monetization. We believe it looks like cybercrime capitalization in 2016, which would reach the level of the second most valuable US company. It's a huge amount of money. Ransomware families, you all know about this, incredibly successful as a business model, going up. Data breaches, 20% more than last year. First terabyte DDoS attack has happened. Well, you can read it for yourselves, yeah? So, you know, it's in a game where we are, of course, continually trying to get better, catching up. Incidentally, the fact that we record every year increasing number of incidents doesn't necessarily mean that that's really what's happening, of course, well, I believe it is. But the other thing that's happening is we're measuring more. So be careful when interpreting data like this, because it's not really very scientific. And another thing I would challenge you is how predictable, how useful is this data? We tend to make the assumption when we analyze security data that it's predictive. That's a big assumption. If you look at the way security has evolved over the last 5 years, 15 years, the big events have been what we call black swan events, which were not at all predictable on the basis of accumulated data. Example, Stuxnet. Predictable from a technological point of view, not from an impact point of view, where we change from pecuniary impact to human lives. That was the big change of Stuxnet, of course. Yeah. Okay, moving on, almost at the end now, conscious of time. Standardization and certification are going to be two huge themes in the European sphere, at least for the next year, so please keep an eye on it. A lot of effort going into this. Of course, you know, as I opened up today, I mentioned one of the challenges in general is adapting our system so that we become more agile and more effective. Yeah, huge challenges here, and that's not criticizing these people. Of course, you know, we have fantastic standards development organizations, but everyone realizes that you cannot afford to take 3 years to develop a standard when the technology goes out of date in a year and a half or whatever. So ideas here are things like using best practice as a precursor standard, accepting more risk, but doing so in a controlled way and documenting what that risk is, etc. So, the NSA approach to standards is we promote best practices through standard development organizations. Again, best practices are a good guide to what might become a standard. We play the role of an interface between private sector, public sector, and SDOs. We believe very strongly, incidentally, that private sector should be a bigger motor in standards. There's no use having standards if the private sector are not going to deploy them, okay? There's a big role for public sector as well, of course, but I believe more involvement of private sector is absolutely necessary so that we get the right standards that industry will take on board. Short to mid-term goals, so we have formal cooperation with the standards development organizations. We take part in specific working groups, etc. And we have long-term goals related to review and participation in the standardization activities as a whole. But it's a big thing, is my message. So find out what's happening and make sure you don't get left behind. Now, in terms of what's happening, challenges at an EU perspective, there's a lot of work going on into the recognition of trustworthiness of security products. So for years, we've had common criteria. Although there are interesting things going on in the common criteria space, there are things we need to get aligned at the international level which are in discussion, one of them being to what level we should certify to. And this sort of comes into World Trade Organization, technical barrier to trade issues, etc. There's a far bigger issue to my mind, and that's that common criteria is quite heavy. Yeah? When we are talking about these new technologies, we want lightweight systems. Yeah? We want lightweight certification. But then the other side of the coin is, even if you have lightweight certification, you need to make sure that people knows what it is. If people do not know what the certification represents, why the hell do you do it? Yeah? That's the value of the thing, that people say, this is certified, let's buy it, or let's use it. That's not so evident with the general public. For instance, if you put an image on your website saying my product is certified, I can spoof that image, yeah? And the average user will know no different. So there are real challenges in this business. How do we get effective certification which goes right to the end and encourages people to behave differently in a market, you know, in which you have 500 million people buying new products, potentially risky products all the time? Not an easy challenge. Of course, as with most things, we work very closely with our national partners to do this. Our view on certification, we believe that we should aim towards a common European ICT product security certification framework. We think that processes and skills should come later. There's a market for all three, but products, we already have a critical mass here which we can build on. It needs to be open, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to facilitate harmonization. I think open is really the way to go. I'm not going to launch into this discussion, but interoperability of security products is a major thing. We need to be careful not to produce fragmentation within the EU single market, and we don't want to create unnecessary bottlenecks for introducing products into the market. So, all in all, we have a very good idea of what the problem is. We're struggling a little bit with the solutions, but we are talking to the right people, and I believe we will get there. So we have a stakeholder group ongoing with the member states. We're also talking to industry. We've got quite a nice set of discussions going with the semiconductor industry, for instance, where we're talking with all the big suppliers about how certification and standardization applies to their industry segment, and we would like to broaden this out to a number of other segments in future years. So a lot of work going on. Again, I won't go into too much detail. I'll just make you aware of it. Let's wrap up. This is what we're going to be doing in our next steps, which is NIS directive implementation. We have 21 months, incidentally, for the member states to so-called transpose this international law. We'll hopefully play an important role of an important partner for the CPP and the certification work. We will carry on supporting prominent activities such as cyber exercises, and we would really like to ask you to support us in renewing our mandate. We're a small institution, we're modest, but I do think that what we do contributes to a better level of security across Europe, even if it's largely transparent. Hopefully I've convinced you of that today. But let me go through my list again. The very last thing I want to do is to wrap up where we started. If I can find my list, here it is. So some of the things that I haven't talked about, and now you're in an excellent position to put them together. Training and skill sets. If we don't train people, if we don't have the right skill sets in Europe, if we do not have awareness, awareness doesn't cut it, participation. Yeah? Awareness is great, but you don't do anything if you're aware necessarily. So we need to move from awareness to participation. Cybersecurity is an economic enabler. I've touched upon it there. I could give a whole presentation on this, of course. Move to agile processes is really important. It's no good having the best solution in the world if you're on the market after everybody else, as the VHS Betamax history taught us. Building cybersecurity into the industrial process, Industry 4.0, secure coding, all this kind of stuff. Aligning cybersecurity and safety will become more and more of an issue as we move along. And again, the huge task of implementing, and I choose my words carefully, the privacy and data protection ambitions of the Union, most ambitious in the world probably. Let's make it work. So I think I've kept to my time. Thank you very much for listening to me.